The Memphis Grizzlies suffered a pretty tough loss at the hands of the Golden State Warriors earlier this week. They are now on their first 4-game losing streak in 2 years. Is the sky falling? The Chicken Littles are out. It seems like it might be. We'll talk about that here. Plus, no Ja Morant as a starter in the All-Star game and how the losing streak can be snapped tonight against the Timberwolves with Damichael Cole in the house. It's the end of the week. It's Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, and welcome to Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, joined by my wonderful co-host, the dapper, the handsome, the globe-trotting Damichael Cole, the road-weary Damichael Cole. I know he's on his last stop, and I know hotel living's fun for a little while, but I bet you're ready to be back in Memphis in your own bed.
I miss my own bed. I'm getting to that point. It's cool. You get to see all these different hotels. And you get to eat all the nice food in different cities, but it's nothing like I miss my Memphis barbecue. I miss my Memphis honey gold wings. I miss it, Joe. I miss it.
I'm jealous. I wish you'd stop talking about it. I'm getting hungry over here. Shoot this man an endorsement deal. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. We are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We are also available on YouTube. Rate, review, comments, subscribe, all those fun things. Make us a part of your NBA and Grizzlies experience on a day-to-day basis. We haven't been together in a couple days, Damichael, since our last show. The Memphis Grizzlies losing streak extended to a 2-year high, 4-game losing streak. And I created a bit of a hullabaloo. It might be the technical term, Damichael. I'm very good at that, as you know, on social media. I continue to be the guy who goes from homer to hater and back and forth. I'm just the agent of chaos, I guess, among Grizzlies folks. I'm still not worried. Maybe I should be at this stage. The Grizzlies have lost 4 in a row, but I remember the 11 that they won before that. And if you want to point the people that they're losing to, obviously better teams, the fact that it's a continued road concern, even though Memphis, I know you've pointed this out to Michael, has one of the better road records in the Western Conference. How much of this stretch, because you've seen them in person each and every game on this road swing, how much of this is road weariness? How much of this is they're not good enough? How much of this is just the Western Conference in parity? I think that might be where you're kind of leaning towards. The Grizzlies are the 2 seed, but I think Golden State's the 7 seed right now. A 2-7 series against the Warriors in the first round, that would be a pretty tough matchup.
It'd be a pretty tough matchup. But you know what? It'd also be a pretty tough matchup if you get the Clippers. It'd be a pretty tough matchup if you get the Suns. Right. It'd be a pretty tough matchup if you get the Kings. You can't run from it. You can't run from it in the West, and that goes back to the parity thing. But I can play both sides here. I can be, the guy to say the world's falling. Then I could be the guy who installs a little hope into this fan base right now. But the reality is somewhere in the middle, Joe. It's always right in the middle. It's never, they always say never get too high, never get too low, right? That's a big, just a part of life. But with the Grizzlies, here's the thing. Yes, they've lost 4 in a row. And it came after they won 11 games in a row. It is notable. There are some issues that need to be fixed. But to the contrary, Joe, they've lost they've lost by 2 points. They've lost by 3. They've lost by 1 possession 3 times in these 4 games. Sacramento Kings game was the only blowout of, the 4 games. And that was the one that came on the second night of a back-to-back. So basically my point being is actually you want to go by the technicality of it. This is something I've talked about on Twitter and wrote about as well. If you look at the last 2-minute reports, and I'm not, referees make mistakes. You never hear me, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on here, I'm never the guy to completely bash referees because I try to be understanding from that perspective. But if you want to be the technical person and say, hey, the last 2-minute reports of those 3 close games, 2 of them have shown that the Grizzlies basically got robbed. If you go back to the Lakers game, Brandon Clark, lane violation on Russell Westbrook, according to the last 2-minute report put out by NBA Communications, which is, after they review the film of the last 2 minutes of the game, Russell Westbrook committed a lane violation when Brandon Clark missed his second free throw. If Brandon Clark gets that second free throw and makes it, we're talking about potentially a completely different game. Then you go back to this Warriors game, right? Everyone remembers the Jordan Poole shot, but right before that Jordan Poole shot, Klay Thompson hit the big three-pointer that where the Golden State Warriors were down 1, they went up 2. He hits the three-pointer. The last 2-minute report determined that on that play, and I've seen some Grizzlies fans already complaining about this, Draymond Green committed an illegal moving screen on Dillon Brooks. And as you can see, if you go watch the replay, Dillon Brooks basically is right there on Klay by the time he gets the shot off. But that little, Draymond Green kind of holds him and moves out, those Warrior screens that people, joke about a lot. Mm-hmm. But basically, Joe, last 2-minute report calls where if they flip them around and go the other way, the Grizzlies are 2-2. On this road trip. So, it depends on how you want to look at it, right? Overall, like I said, it's always down there in the middle. And basically, the point that I'm making is the Grizzlies haven't gotten blasted, much on this road trip. Sacramento had one of the greatest shooting games I've seen this season. Outside of that, they've been right there. Even in the Suns game, from 29 down, they fought all the way back. So the world, it isn't the end of the world. And at the end of the day, the Grizzlies, over all the teams that have beaten them, they'd have home court over those guys in a playoff series. There are bigger issues, Joe.
I am curious as to your take, and I agree with everything you just said. I think that there's a lot of reasons to acknowledge why they're struggling. Again, I've said, essentially, I haven't said it directly, but, I'll get hot takey on this Friday episode. I'm feeling froggy. The Memphis Grizzlies are the best rebuilding team of the last 10 years. This is technically still a rebuilding roster. I'll get hot takey in terms of how they have built it, and they're winning at a very high level, right? They don't have the veteran superstar. They don't have veteran leadership in a traditional sense, but that might be an episode maybe on an off day here coming up where I go on my soapbox with that. I'm curious as to your take on Zaire Williams before we move on to talking about some all-star voting. I'm seeing a lot of hatred. Maybe that's a little strong, but angst.
No, you're probably right. He was
about
trending
our boy Zaire
on Twitter,
on Twitter, and he is very. I think I can say he's our boy. Like, we both enjoy Zaire Williams in terms of what his role will be for this team.
Yeah.
I saw I used to work at grizzlybearblues.com. I was the site manager there, and one of my former writers, Nathan Chester, compared him to Andrew Harrison, which. You're allowed to laugh at that. I too laughed at that. That just seems a little extreme. I think he against the Lakers, it may not have been the Lakers, correct me if I'm wrong. I know he had a recent 15.5 assist or 5 rebound game where he played well on this road trip. Suns, thank you. So it was the Suns game. So he's had good performances literally on this road trip. And after a poor showing against the Warriors, and he openly admits that it was a poor showing, now we're making Andrew Harrison comps. I just think we need to settle down a little bit, Damichael. That seems intense.
Yeah, but before I get into that, I just, for one, want to salute Zaire Williams for actually taking the time to talk to me after the game.
Your article was impressive about that. I really did enjoy reading it.
Yeah, thanks. But he was sitting in the corner. Everyone has to remember when you're kind of crapping on these guys, as much as angry as you are, these guys are in the gym every single day. They put their blood, sweat, and tears into this. So as angry as you are, imagine how angry he is that he couldn't buy a three-point shot. He shot 0 of 6. He was minus 19 while no one else was, I think -5 was the next lowest. And the shot with Jordan Poole, the last second basket, which wasn't his fault, by the way, but, it basically came off. The shot was on him. So it was tough. But here's the thing. I think, and I'm sure you agree with this, because I've written about it, I've talked about it. Zaire Williams in the mid-range is his bread and butter. He is, and I'm gonna say these names just to give you an idea, but I don't, his mid-range shooting percentages kind of put you in the thought of KD, Devin Booker. I wouldn't say DeMar DeRozan, I think, is the best mid-range shooter in the game. But basically his percentage is high enough to the point where when he shoots mid-range jumpers, like the rest of those guys, you automatically think it's going in as soon as he shoots it. But the thing is, we don't see it a lot. So after the game, I was talking, Taylor Jenkins, and I asked him, when he's shooting 6 3-pointers out of 7 shots, and the only other shot that he made was an alley-oop dunk, is there a willingness to say, hey, Zaire, take one dribble and, take the mid-range jumper? I know some coaches coach that way, but the NBA is different. And in short, Taylor Jenkins liked the shots that Zaire Williams got. Granted, they were open shots, but there's a better way to use his skill set, Joe. Andrew Harrison no. This guy has game. We saw it in Summer League. The mid-range game, I've talked about the way he runs the floor. Defensively, he's a very capable player. You mentioned the Suns game recently as one he basically willed the team back in. He was a big part of that, bringing that team from down 29. He's a big part of this future. And I see everyone talking trade and all of that stuff. But I think, last time your other guy, Parker Fleming, mentioned this. The last time we saw him have kind of one of those big letdown games was in Philly. And he came back the next game, and I was on this trip, talked to him in Philly. Then we saw him in New York, and he went to the Garden and put up 21 points. I think it was like one of the biggest games in his career up to that point. So don't give up on this guy yet. There's a lot left out there for Zaire Williams.
I will buy all of the Zaire Williams stock that anybody is selling. He's a 6'8" true perimeter player. He's not a stretch 4. He's a 2. He's a 3. I think he could beat DeMar DeRozan. Like everybody talks about these theoretical Raptor trades with OG Anunoby. He's going to become their second DeMar DeRozan in terms of what he can do in the mid-range. So I think this is more about Taylor Jenkins evolving as a coach and letting that guy get some mid-range shots, because that Jenkins wants threes and he wants them at the basket. He said that multiple times. I know you've heard him say that if I've heard it. And, that's not Zaire's strength right now, especially at the 3. And you could argue he hasn't really shown it's his strength at any point in his career to this stage. So let him cook, Taylor. Let our boy Zaire cook. Get him in the mid-range. And then maybe after he sees some shots fall, get him on the perimeter. We'll talk All-Star game and our boy Ja Morant. Everybody's boy Ja Morant, except for haters of the Memphis Grizzlies, not being a starter, which is kind of interesting. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. You've got to check out LinkedIn Jobs because of that. With LinkedIn Jobs, you hire qualified candidates more efficiently, matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond the resume data by using insights from the job post you make. Your company and all 875 million member profiles come together to put you in front of the most qualified candidates. You identify those qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them for free quickly. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one platform. This year is already flying by, Damichael. It's almost the end of the first month of 2023. You got to get the right team member on your team to help you achieve your goals. And LinkedIn Jobs, the #1 in ranked site in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors, is for you. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. No Ja as a starter in the All-Star game. We talk that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Grizzlies beat writer on the last leg of his own personal road trip, getting ready for the Timberwolves game tonight. We'll talk more about that later on in the show. But first, All-Star starters were announced, Damichael. Woohoo! And if everybody remembers correctly, this time last year. Ooh, Ja Morant.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, fist bumps and air. Do people still raise the roof? Probably not. But
don't date yourself, Joe. Date yourself. Don't date yourself.
I'll start doing the Macarena. But anyway, whatever method of celebration you believed in, Memphis was thrilled. Ja Morant started for the All-Star game. Awesome stuff. This year, not a starter for the All-Star game. And something that I saw that was interesting to Michael, they've started revealing the media vote, the player vote, the fan vote. I didn't do extensive studying, I'll be honest about that. But from the couple minutes of looking at the lists, he was third, Ja Morant was, in the fan vote, third in the media vote, and third in the player vote. So Steph Curry and Luka Doncic are the starters in the backcourt. And I think it's hard to argue against those two guys. I'm curious, Damichael, there's been a growing movement for all-star starters trying to make it so that it's, positionless, top 5 guys, that sort of thing. Is this more about that? Because when you look at the front court for the Western Conference, I think it's Zion Williamson, it's Nikola Jokic, who no one should argue with that, and it's LeBron James, who's the team captain. As long as LeBron James is playing basketball in the NBA, he's going to be a team captain at the All-Star game. So maybe Zion would be the question. It feels like LeBron, Jokic, Luka, and Steph, sure. It's hard to really kind of put your nose up. But if it was just the 5 top guys, would you take Zion out and put Ja in the Western Conference?
I would, but based on the voting, I don't think he would win still in that case. Zion was a big draw on the fan voting, of course, and I think he outdid Ja there. The players were very high on Zion. I think media was where he was lower. Domantas Sabonis, who I voted, by the way, in the power forward starting spot. I voted.
There you go.
I voted Domantas Sabonis over Zion Williams, primarily because of the availability factor and that whole thing. And, just I'm a big versatility guy, points, rebounds, assists, all of that. But anyways, long story short, it still would be tough. But I have long said that, you should be able to put a guy like Luka at the 3 on a ballot if you want to, or if you want to have 3 guards and four guys around 1 big. I think we should definitely, you should definitely have 1 big man, but around that, I'm definitely an advocate for the positionless basketball because, look at the Eastern Conference, right? Everyone's setting, I got a lot of Philadelphia market followers on my timeline, Joe, and they're about to start a fire over Joel Embiid not being in the All-Star, not being an All-Star starter. So I'm definitely a big advocate for that. But in Ja Morant's case, we've said it time and time again, great season. And guess what? Whoever between Luka and Steph, they probably won this battle, but the war isn't over because there's going to be next season. There's going to be the season after that. There's going to be the season after that. And it's going to be these 3 guys. Shai's probably going to get in there, as the Thunder continue to get better and better. And it's going to be like, hey, look, you only can start 2 of them. Remember last season, Ja beat out Luka. People in Dallas weren't happy about that.
It's true.
And now it's flipped around. So it's just the toughness of the Western Conference. You're going to have to battle Luka. You're going to have to battle Steph Curry, arguably a top 3-point guard of all time. And you're probably going to have to battle Shai Gilgeous, who, as you've seen and I've seen, and we'll have that conversation another day, a lot of people out there in Oklahoma City think he might give Ja a run for his money from a talent standpoint.
Yeah, Andy Bailey, old friend Andy Bailey, did a good job riling me up the other day with that one. I think you're onto something, Damichael, in terms of just acknowledging that the West is loaded. SGA in Oklahoma City, De'Aaron Fox. There's an outside chance he doesn't even make the All-Star team, and I would not support that. Like, I think he should make the All-Star team.
Yeah.
But you got Damian Lillard. You've got all these different names. I think Lillard just hung a 60 piece recently, maybe a couple of 60 pieces. So he's having a great season. There's lots of really good guards. We haven't even talked about Devin Booker.
I was going to say, Joe, not to cut you off, but I saw a list earlier. It was like 7 teams. It said based on the All-Star starters, there are players from X teams that one of these teams won't be an All-Star. And I think you had Portland on there, which, Dame. You had Utah on there. Larry Markkinen has a very strong case. Suns, Devin Booker, Minnesota. We just mentioned, Anthony Edwards. And then, of course, the Kings. There was the Clippers who, they have a lot of talent over there as well. And it was like one of those teams won't have an all-star, and it's wild.
That is pretty wild. I think most people, don't fret too much, Memphis folks. Ja Morant's going to be a reserve. I think it would be pretty absurd for him not to be. He's like 7th in the MVP odds right now. So he'll be in the all-star game. He just won't be one of those starters. And, it will be interesting to see how the rest of it plays out. Sacramento is currently the 3 seed in the Western Conference. And, for them not to have 2 players, the Grizzlies almost certainly will not have 2 players.
Yeah.
Even if you think Jaren Jackson Jr. Deserves it, he likely will not be there in that role. So it's tough to be an all-star. Expand the rosters maybe, or it just because the 15 guys can play in an NBA game, right? 15 active players now, so maybe you make the rosters 15 deep and you expand the love a little bit, or you spread it around. We'll see. Speaking of spreading the love around, the Grizzlies need to stop spreading the love around to other teams with all of these wins and victories. It's time to get off of that train and get back to their winning ways. How can they do that tonight in the final game of their road trip in Minnesota against the Timberwolves? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America. That's FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers can join today to get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You sign up at FanDuel.com/locked-on. They have your favorite bets from money line to player props. Plus, you can combine bets for a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. I would say if you are interested in Zaire Williams having a bounce-back game, as Damichael alluded to earlier, maybe you should take the over on whatever his points line will be. You could do that over at FanDuel, an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So, football fans, the conference championships are this Sunday.
Yeah.
Don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The Memphis Grizzlies of the NBA try to get back on their winning track. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. We're finishing up here. I am your co-host, Joe Mullinax, joined by the wonderful Damichael Cole on this wonderful Friday. Damichael, I'm as we mentioned earlier, excited to come home. But before that, you got one more game to cover. Memphis Grizzlies, Minnesota Timberwolves. The only real surprise on the injury report for the Grizzlies being Desmond Bane, a little bit of knee soreness, it looks like, questionable. So usually when the Grizzlies list somebody as questionable, they have a decent chance of playing. But as long as it doesn't flare up or something gets worse overnight between Thursday and Friday night. But I'm curious, Damichael, as you've watched this team play, obviously you've seen Minnesota as well this season. The Timberwolves having their own issues in a variety of ways, trying to find themselves post major Rudy Gobert trade. How do you see this shaking out between the Grizzlies and the Timberwolves? A pretty heated playoff series last year. And now, Memphis still in their mix as one of the top teams in the Western Conference, but Minnesota's struggling a little bit better recently, but overall still not what you would normally expect from a Minnesota Timberwolves team.
Struggling, yes, but guess what? Just like those other teams the Grizzlies have played, they are good at home. So throw it out the window.
16-10 at home.
16-10 at home, and that's all it. Trust me. We know based off the 4 games of this road trip, that's all that matters. What's the team's home record? We know the overall record and what it says. At home, these teams are different. The Kings, we saw what they did, the Lakers, etc. It's a talented team. First of all, I think there's Kyle Anderson again. It's always fun, but he's been playing some really good basketball.
Looking really good the last 10 or 12 games.
Yeah, he's gotten a bigger role with Karl Anthony Towns being out, and he's taken full advantage of it.
Well, hold on a second, Damichael. Are you saying that Kyle Anderson is better as a big man at this stage of his career? Who could have seen that happening? Who could have predicted that, Damichael Cole?
Don't do it to him, Joe. Don't do it to him. Don't do it to him, Joe.
Who could do it? Who? Me. I did it. People like to point out when I'm wrong all the time, Damichael Cole.
Let him know, Joe. Let him know.
I was right about Kyle Anderson as a big man. Told you
right.
So in your face, whoever's listening and watching this. I love you. Keep listening and watching, please.
He's right. He's right. And you look at Kyle, I mean, he's having a great year, but Anthony Edwards, I think, with, he was struggling at the beginning of the season with the two big men, right? He kept saying there's not a lot of spacing. There was the infamous stat, right? I think it was like the first 8 or 9 games of the season, and Anthony Edwards didn't have a dunk. Like, this is one of the most athletic guards in the game. He could win a dunk contest right now, and he didn't have a dunk.
That's kind of a
they
problem.
were like, yeah, he was like, well, the spacing is, when he goes to the paint, it's 6 dudes down there, so he can't really dunk over
one of
everyone.
them's Rudy Gobert.
one of them is his teammates. So, and we've seen Donovan Mitchell kind of throw some like shade at saying some similar things, but overall, this is a very winnable game. And you know what, Joe? I think this one will be easy to write if the Grizzlies win, because there is a home flavor to this. Right? West Coast, you're far away from home and all that, but David Roddy's going to be in the rotation, Minnesota native, all Minnesota guy, football player, basketball guy, Tyus Jones. We know about the Minnesota connection there. We know what Tyus Jones did in that playoff series against the Timberwolves, including the big shot he knocked down, the big three-pointer in Game 6 as well. So it's going to kind of be like a homecoming for those two guys. And the bench, they've had their ups and downs over this run. I think I'd expect a big night from at least one of them, especially Tyus Jones. But overall, very winnable game. You can't go 0-5. One of the players basically said that to me, in the locker room the other day. Like, we can't go 0-5 on this road trip. So there's pride, as I wrote in my story. There's some pride to this, at this point. And you felt the pride, Joe, against Golden State. I felt the sense of urgency that they were playing with, and that's why they were so upset after the game, because it's like, man, we finally matched intensities and we lose. So I think they're right on the cusp, but Minnesota's not just going to give it to you.
No, and they ride their starters pretty hard, right? Unlike the Memphis Grizzlies, just looking at their most recent minutes against the Pelicans, who, by the way, New Orleans was at home. And it was the return of Brandon Ingram, pretty important player for the Pelicans, and Minnesota wins by 9. Kyle Anderson, our boy, had a good game. Rudy Gobert, 17 and 12. Anthony Edwards, 37 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. You would imagine Dylan Brooks will draw that assignment, but if Bane is hampered or if Bane doesn't play, where do you put Ja Morant? Who starts in that spot? Is it Zaire Williams, with all the struggles like we talked about earlier in the show? It'll be interesting. Austin Rivers is the guy that's their 6th man right now, and he's not really what Austin Rivers used to be. And maybe
he's more of a defender now.
Right. Yeah. Not really just an offensive weapon.
Guy.
And he played 24 minutes. The next guy was Naz Reid, NBA Twitter favorite Naz Reid. Everybody wants to trade for Naz Reid all of a sudden. But he did have 6 points, 7 rebounds in that game, 2 blocks, 2 steals. So maybe there's something to it. But he only played 14 minutes is my point. So, Minnesota's going to ride these starters. They're going to do their best to give the Grizzlies their best shot because of the previous playoff series. For me, a lot of it depends on Desmond Bane. If Desmond Bane plays, I think they have a legitimate chance. He's the guy that helps them in their half-court offense when it gets stagnant. He's the guy that helps Ja Morant in terms of spacing. He really is significant and important in terms of keeping that ship sailing. If the Grizzlies are without both Bane and Adams in this one, I don't have a good feeling about it. If Bane's out on the floor, I think that they have a better chance to kind of survive and endure. One of the things I like about the fact that Cat is out, Karl Anthony Towns still not playing, I believe, with Cat not active, Rudy Gobert's there as a center by himself. If they stay with the Clark and Jackson Jr. front court pairing, Damichael, Jaren's going to be out on the perimeter, and that means Rudy's got to be outside of the paint too. And I think that's going to be important for Ja in particular.
That's worked out for a lot of teams. We mentioned each time the Jazz were put out in the postseason. I think, the one series that just stands out to me is the Clippers series a couple years ago when the Clippers basically went small and they had Rudy Gobert on the perimeter. But we've seen it, with the James Harden Rockets and so on. Like teams, Luka, and I think it was Jalen Brunson who actually had more success than Luka because Luka missed some games in that series against Rudy Gobert in that way. So the Grizzlies have guys who can do that, But I tell you what, I'm a writer, right? I love the fairy tales stuff. And wouldn't it be something if Zaire Williams drew? Because if Desmond Bane doesn't play, I mean, who else are you expecting to start? It could go to Tyus, but I mean, Taylor Jenkins is probably it's going to be Zaire. But wouldn't that be storybook, Joe?
20 points. If it was a PrizePicks game, go over more than for Zaire. I see this as a chance because the Grizzlies have a little bit of emotion, not quite as much as the Warriors, but they don't like Minnesota particularly, and Minnesota obviously doesn't like Memphis. But I do think that there's going to be some desperation to these Grizzlies. They're not used to this. Again, they haven't had a 4-game losing streak in 2 years, Damichael. I think it was February of 2021 was the last time they had such a streak. So I see Jaren having a good game, making Rudy come back outside. I'm not sure that McDaniels is going to be able to hang with Clark in terms of physicality. I think that's a good matchup for Memphis there. I'm curious. I'm curious to the way that they are going to compete and be desperate. You know, we haven't had to see them to be in that spot. You don't want to go on an 0-5 road trip. That opens up a lot of questions. 1-4 still isn't great, but at least you have that flight home, and it's a happy flight, like Pete Pranica and Brevin Knight like to say, the TV crew. Happy flight home from Minnesota, hopefully for you and the Grizzlies after they take on the Timberwolves on Friday tonight in Minnesota. Thank you so much for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now make your second listen game to game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result, Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. The next time we're here on Locked On Grizzlies, Damichael, you'll be back home. Thank goodness for you. Very exciting. It'll be after the Indiana Pacers game. The Grizzlies take on the Pacers at home. Worst case scenario, if Minnesota doesn't go the way Memphis wants it to, the Pacers, in theory, should be a game where the Grizzlies are able to kind of hang their hats a little bit more, but you don't want to count your chickens before they hatch, so to speak. And if they had lost 5 in a row, all bets are off. So hopefully we're talking about 2 games won in a row next time we're together, Damichael, for Monday's show, as opposed to the alternative.
Yeah, it's this team can't wait to get back home, man. And I remember before the road trip even started, I was just having a little small talk with Ja, and we were just talking, and I'm like, aren't you excited about this road trip? When you go out west, it's a lot of lights, right? LA, San Fran, ESPN
and
games.
Dylan Brooks' birthday was around the LA day. There's probably some truth to that maybe that you can't tell us about. But maybe there's a little bit of something to that.
I'll just say they like to have fun in Phoenix, man. That's I'll leave it at that. Won't say much more. But with that being said, getting back home is important to this team. Ja, I mean, we don't talk about it a lot, but there is a mental state to it too, right?
Sure.
Ja is a young father. Dez is a young father. Tyus is expecting a second child soon here, so you'll see the personal reasons pop up at some point relatively soon for Tyus Jones, possibly. So basically his wife is pregnant. She's like 8 or 9 months at this point. And I'm not sure how much that factors in, but again, going back to the conversation I had with Ja, say, do you like going on the road? You're going to San Fran, LA, Phoenix. He's like, nah, man, I miss my daughter. I want to, and I've never been a pro basketball player. I don't know how much that plays into it, Joe. But I'm sure, on the backside of that, you are thinking like, as Dez probably like, I can't wait to get back to see my son. And Ja, we see him and Kari all the time. And then Tyus, with his pregnant wife and so forth. So these guys can't wait to get back home. But like you said, it'll be good for them to kind of go into that home court feeling, with a happy mood in this game against Minnesota.
Brings us full circle, right? We talk about Zaire and his head down after the game against the Warriors and, all those things. These guys are humans, right? They're human beings, and they, it's a long time to be away. That firsthand on your trip. And, obviously these guys with, daughters and sons, young children, I can relate to that a little bit as a dad. I'm just away from them for a day sometimes, and you miss them. So Good on the Grizzlies for, trying to be those good dads, and good on Ja for missing his baby girl. I'm sure he'll be excited to see her here soon. And hopefully that excitement on a much less important scale carries over to the basketball court in Memphis, is on a 2-game mini winning streak the next time you see Damichael and I. For Damichael Cole, my wonderful co-host, I'm Joe Mullinax. Continue to rate, review, subscribe, like, comment, however you get your podcasts, however you check out YouTube videos. Continue to make Locked On Grizzlies part of your NBA experience. We appreciate you for it. Until next time, stay locked in, Grizzlies fans. This is Locked On Grizzlies. Have a great weekend.